Hi folks, this is just a random pre-hike video that shows some of the nutty stuff that's been going through my head in the weeks leading up to my hike. In going through my gear, I thought it was prudent to test my Sawyer Squeeze water filter. I've used it in 6 shakedown hikes totaling over 250 miles, and sure enough it was clogged. I've always back flushed it during and after every hike, but I suspect that if it sits too long, the residual stuff in them will eventually gel and clog the thing up, which is exactly what happened. So I'm glad I tested it in time to order another one. And because the inside of this ancient body of mine, I'm actually a 12-year-old kid, I took the old one outside to the sidewalk and beat the hell out of it with a hammer so I could see what its guts looked like, and I'm going to show that to you now. Sure enough, regardless of how well I'd back flushed it the last time it was used, there was still plenty of debris still in there and enough to gel and clog it, rendering it useless. So now you know. Next concern was identifying my gear. Considering how crowded the trail is likely to be in the early months and how popular my brand of gear is, I also thought it was prudent to mark my gear with something recognizable so it doesn't get mixed up with everyone else's. I bought a 24-inch strip of reflective tape at Home Depot for less than $4. I then cut it into small strips and placed a small piece on each of my 2 trekking poles, so in case they're tossed into the back of a pickup truck and get bounced around with someone else's, I'll know which ones are mine. Put a small strip on each side of my Z-Packs duplex tent, knowing full well there will be many tents that look exactly like mine, and I want to be able to easily identify mine in the dark when returning from a water source or a privy. I put another on my Toaks titanium cook pot and marked the Z-Packs bear bag so I can easily spot it in the dark, hanging alongside all the other blue bear bags on the bear cables. I didn't want to write my name on everything and thought this was a better way for identifying things in the dark. So as long as the tape holds out, I suspect it's a pretty good hack. The next area of concern was toothpaste. What to do with the spit is troublesome because you're not supposed to leave any trace, much less one with a scent. So spitting toothpaste requires moving a good distance from the shelter, digging a hole to spit in, and burying it, which quite honestly sounds like a pain in the butt. Some hikers suggest not using any toothpaste at all, the theory being that toothpaste is only useful for delivering fluoride, and one can go 5 to 6 months without it and not do any harm to your teeth. Well, I asked my dentist about that, and she groaned understandably, then brought up the horrible diet that hikers are known for, consisting of sugars and carbs that get stuck in the teeth, and the lack of protection your teeth will have from a heavy sugar diet. What'd you expect her to say? Not to mention that I'm going to want to freshen my breath on occasion to neutralize morning breath or coffee breath whenever possible. Over the half dozen shakedown hikes I've taken, I've discovered something purely by accident. Some toothpaste brands lather up your mouth like crazy, and some hardly at all. When faced with rinsing out a lathered up mouth and toothbrush, a great deal of water was needed, damn near a third of a bottle. Conversely, when using a toothpaste that didn't lather quite as much, very little water was needed. For that reason, I'll be taking Crest 3D on my hike. It lathers very little, and I can actually rinse my mouth out and swallow the residue with very little water waste at all. Problem solved. Now, I know that sounds like a stupid little thing, but it's the stupid little things that can make life on the trail just a little more bearable. In a game of grams, straws, and millimeters, I'll take every advantage I can get. Speaking of stupid little things, I saw a post online where a hiker cut all the tags off his clothing and gear and saved himself 8 ounces of weight. Yeah, a half a freaking pound of useless, worthless tags. I thought that was brilliant, so I did it too. I went through everything in my bag, cut every tag I could find off. Then I weighed them, and to my delight, I had cut my weight by almost 1/4 of an ounce. Yeah, about 7 full grams. My advice on this brilliant idea? Don't bother. I can spit more than 7 grams of toothpaste in one fell swoop. Don't waste your time on that one unless you're buying your gear from bigtags.com. Another preemptive strike against a well-known problem, tangled bear cords. The first time I went out on a shakedown hike and used a bear cord, it became a tangled mess. The second time I went out, I'd cut a piece of cardboard into an hourglass shape and then wrapped the cord around it. It was fine until it rained on the second night and totally disintegrated. The third time I went out, I had cut a plastic butter tub lid into an hourglass shape, and bingo, it worked. It lasted in the rain, still fixing my rucksack, no tangling since. I'm predicting this to be a pretty decent idea. Something else I've learned in my shakedowns, you're going to need a good garbage bag, and you'll likely need a new one every 4 to 5 days. Some hikers carry gallon-sized Ziplocs because they're lightweight and they seal the odor in. That's fine, but you're not going to want to empty and reuse it, and you're probably going to want to throw it away. At least I would. You're not going to want to carry a bunch of them, nor buy a full box every time you run out. I started carrying 5 or 6 of the plastic bags you get from Walmart, Target, Walgreens, or just about any store you might be resupplying from. These weigh less than the Ziplocs, can tie onto the outside of your bag when hiking, making them easier to access. No, they don't seal. But if you're worried about the smell, put your trash in one, wrap it up tightly, then put that in another that ties onto your pack. They're lightweight, they're free. You only need to carry a few at a time to get from one resupply to another, and you can get a few of them just about anywhere you go. Remember though, hang your trash along with your food bag at night. I don't put my trash in my food bag. I just use the bag handles to tie it onto the outside. One last thing I want to mention, now that I'm only a few weeks from starting, there's such a thing as panic buying. It involves the last-minute decisions to purchase items out of fear, and I suspect you might already be familiar with it. Fear of hunger will have you buying twice the amount of food you're actually going to need. Fear of the cold will have you buying more and heavier clothing than you're going to need. I'm very guilty of this. On my shakedown hikes, I initially brought way too much food. Each subsequent hike, I brought less, and by the 6th hike, I had just about figured it out correctly. The hiker hunger that everyone talks about is very real, but it doesn't happen right away. I hear it happens after a few weeks, but the longest shakedown I've taken was 8 days. So starting out, I plan on carrying just barely enough to get me from Amicalola to mountain crossings, about 3.5 days worth of food. I anticipate there'll be a few trail angels along the way as well, but I think it's presumptuous to count on that. If it happens, it's a blessing. If it doesn't, no problem. As for cold weather clothing, this is a first for me. I'm a Florida man, and anything lower than 70 has me throwing a log on the fire. This year's winter blizzard has had me terrified of what I'm getting my suntanned ass into, and the last month of panic buying began. First, I bought a sleeping bag liner. Then it was wind and rain pants. Then it was a merino wool hoodie. Then it was newer, thicker, waterproof gloves. Every week I was ordering something else. I even considered crampons, but I've restrained myself so far. Well, that's it. Panic buying and just a few simple hacks I've learned on my own shakedowns. We'll see how well they hold up on the big hike. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you know what to do. I'm totally an amateur at this and learning along the way, so I'm always open for suggestions. In the meantime, happy trails. Hope to see you in a few weeks.